Prayer. Thank you, Father, for this day and this opportunity. Thank you for these prayer needs, and be with us today. Be with the teacher in the worship service to follow. In your name I pray.
Amen.
Okay, most of you were here last week, and what I'm going to do first is just a brief review of the constellations, which you have on your handout. We divided the 12 main constellations into 3 groups of 4. And each one has a theme, and each of them has 3 decans or minor constellations that carry through that theme. So let's look at these. I think what I'm going to do I'm going to go back and actually run through the images real quick. I think most people enjoy looking at the images.
Well, that dock needs a little bit of work.
Okay.
That's part of Star Wars.
I don't think so.
All right, here we go.
You know, when that dock was up there, you could say we had a paradox.
That's a great one.
Good morning. We have, here's an extra, and there's more on the back. All right.
Hey, Tom, are we meeting next week, next Sunday?
Yes.
Yes.
For Father's Day?
Yes.
We only take Mother's Day.
Yeah.
This father's going to be here wrapping this up.
Okay.
Today we're going to do a quick review of last week with emphasis on this handout because there's just a brief passage about each of the constellations, and then we're going to go through some historical background and we'll start our video, and then next week we'll finish the video. It was an hour and 6 minutes, so we couldn't quite get it all in one day. So Virgo the Virgin is holding in her left hand the best of the seed. Jesus was the seed of the woman. And in her right hand, the branch. Jesus was the branch. And see how text said I am. All right. The first decan is coma. Coma is has nothing to do with the medical induced coma. Coma is means the desired. And the infant there is the desired one, and the virgin is sitting on a throne and holding the infant. Centaur, or Centaurus, was a true man and true God in one. And the name means the pierced, and he has a lance, which he is aiming, and we'll get to his target here in a moment. So many of these, of course, represent Christ. Boots, or Arcturus. Arcturus was the largest star on his left knee there. With Boots in his right hand, he's holding a spear, or it could be a shepherd's crook. In his left hand, he's holding a sickle, getting ready to harvest souls. Okay, Libra is the next of the main constellations. You can see it with the scales held up. For some reason they depicted it this way, but the upside down T, we talked about, that was representative of the cross. And it's not just for weighing commodities, it's talking about the wages of sin and the price of redemption. The Southern Cross is, you have a handout? Because we have some on the back there. The Southern Cross, that the centaur is crossing over. And here is the victim of centaur, called lupus, which sounds like lupine or wolf. It can be a variety of animals. You can see the lance there piercing the wolf, and it actually represents the slain, pierced, and sinless Jesus. So we're going to take all these back to Christ. The corona is the crown that Christ earned by his sacrifice. And you can see the tail of the serpent there. The serpent's trying to steal the crown. Scorpio is another of the main constellations, and it can be any venomous thing, but in this case it's the scorpion. You can see just above it the foot of Ophiuchus being withdrawn as if he was stung, but then his other foot is crushing the scorpion. Ophiuchus is this hero who is wrestling the serpent. He's got both hands on it. He's trying to hold on to this writhing serpent while he's crushing the scorpion. Hercules, you see that his right foot is up as if he's been stung or injured there. And in his left hand, he's holding this three-headed monster. He's defeated the dragon, and he's got his left foot over the dragon's head. Now here's Sagittarius, another centaur. He's the archer. He's aiming his arrow at the scorpion. He's both God and man again. Lyra is the harp. The eagle is holding the lyre, or harp, in triumph over the serpent. Hera is the altar with a burning pyre, and it's facing downward as if burning over the lake of fire. Draco is the dragon. You can see the foot of Hercules over the dragon's head, and the dragon's being cast down, and he will ultimately end up in the lake of fire. Capricornus is the goat. He is a combination of the goat who's dying as an atonement for sins, and a vigorous fish on the other end, which is the church, which is alive because of Jesus' resurrection. So you've got his death and his resurrection. Sagitta is the arrow of judgment, piercing the willing lamb. Aquila is the eagle that's been pierced and is falling as Christ died. And Delphinus is the dolphin, which is rising up, depicting resurrection as Jesus was resurrected. Aquarius is the water bearer, the water man pouring a great stream from the urn. It's coming out with the flow of a river, and Jesus poured out the river of the water of life. At the other end of the river, Pisces australis, or the southern fish, is swallowing that stream, and he's representing the church, which was made up of Christ and the bride. Then you have Pegasus, the white-winged horse, speeding with good tidings. And Cygnus is the swan. And I don't have the depiction of this with the background darkened and his stars lighter, but they make a beautiful cross going along the body and across the wings. He's the sign of Jesus on the cross. Okay, Pisces are these two fish tied by their tails to a band, which you can just see at the edge of the frame is Ares the ram is holding the band. It's also attached to a sea monster, which we'll mention. But notice one fish is going north towards the North Star, one is swimming along the ecliptic. The ecliptic is that line that marks the path of the earth or the sun. Cepheus is a crowned king with a scepter. This is Jesus on his throne in heaven. At the same time, Andromeda is chained to rock on the seashore, threatened by a sea monster. Andromeda recommends the earthly church. that's being threatened by the world, but then saved by Christ. Aries is the ram, again, holding the band that has the two elements of the church there. We talked about the two fish could represent the Old Testament church, which was saved by faith in the future Messiah, and the New Testament church, which was saved by faith in what Jesus had done. Cassiopeia is actually the church in heaven, enthroned. Cetus is the sea monster. And for those of you who were here, who were not here last week, we did go through these in greater detail. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. This ugly sea monster is threatening the church. Obviously, the church's enemy, and is bound by the Lamb. If you can see on the back of the neck is where the band has been wrapped around the neck, and the sea monster is being held by the church and the Lamb. Perseus is a hero called the Breaker, and we read the Old Testament passage about Messiah coming and breaking out to let the remnant of Israel escape from their hiding place as Christ went to conquer his enemies. Okay. Taurus, the bull, he's powerful, he's enraged, he's representing the judgment of Christ. You can see up in his shoulder a cluster of stars called the Pleiades, which was mentioned in the passage of Job. We'll touch on that today a little bit. But he's representing the judgment of Christ. Orion, the glorious prince, has the famous sword on his belt. The head of the sword is the head of a lamb, and he has his left foot is poised above what looks like a huge bunny rabbit. It's
It's an evil bunny rabbit.
it's a very evil bunny rabbit. Thank you. Bad bunny. Bad bunny. And it's called Lepus, the hare, which is enemy in Arabic, I think. This is Eridanus, the river, tortuous river of the judge. And we went back to some of the passages that talked about this fiery river coming out from the throne of God. And Auriga, the shepherd, has a she-goat up on his left shoulder, and on his left hand, you can hardly see them. They're two little kids, two little babies, and he is the nurturing shepherd there. Now, Gemini, the twins, have been given lots of different meanings. It looks like they're ready for battle, but they're resting. The bow is unstrung. The club's held at his side in rest. And there's the bad bunny again with the foot of Orion about to crush it. Orion, by legend, loved to hunt rabbits. So. Canis Major, on his nose is the star Sirius, one of the brightest. Canis Major is the great dog. He's the prince coming. And Canis Minor is the second dog. Procyon is his bright star, and he's symbolic of heaven's army. Cancer, the crab, or scarab beetle. The beetle and the crab both shed the old man and put on the new, symbolic of what we go through. Ursa Minor has this long upheld tail, unlike a bear, and the pole star is out on the end of that tail. The reference is really talking about a sheepfold, a shelter for the sheep, and this is the lesser sheepfold. And Ursa Major, or the Great Bear, is the greater sheepfold. Argo is the Argonaut ship. The prince and the travelers are returning with the golden fleece, and comparable to Jesus with the treasures that he is preparing in heaven at our homegoing. Leo the lion is the last of the main 12, and you can see on his right thigh is the star Regulus, which we'll talk about today in our video. And he is powerful, fierce, leaping. He's prevailed over the serpent. He's the judge and the bridegroom and the lamb, all in one. Hydra is the serpent that's been trodden down by the lion. The crater is the cup that holds the bowl of wrath that's poured out on all the wicked. And Corvus is the raven or crow, the bird of doom, that's tearing away at the serpent. Okay, any questions about that? Everybody's got a handout, so if you have any questions at any time, let me know.
Now, who was the one was it Israel that started like these groups of 12 stars? Or where did it come from? I mean, I know it's Greek mythology, but where did it come from?
Actually, it came from long before the Greeks.
Okay.
So God created the stars,
Right.
flung them into their position, their place, and he's named them all. Not one is out of place,
Right.
okay?
Well,
And
who came up
the
with?
constellations were named by early man.
Oh, okay.
And as you read through the account of Genesis, you realize that each of them lived almost 1,000 years.
Ah, yes.
So you got 1,000 years, no internet, no TV, and you go up on top of your house at night where it's cooler, and you lay there and you look at the stars. And so,
No telescope,
no telescope.
so they were missing a lot of stars.
They were.
So
They-
are we.
They
However,
could see a
there was
lot.
No light pollution.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the, I think he'll mention it in the video. There's 100 billion galaxies, and each one has 100 billion stars.
Oh my word.
So,
They're all named.
and God's named them all, and He knows where they are.
Well, he doesn't put them there, so.
That's right. He said, "You Regulus, you go over there." He did it. So we're going to talk a little bit about the historical background. First of all, difference in astronomy and astrology. Who remembers that?
I don't know, I forgot because I'm a Leo.
You're at the end. I don't know enough about all that to.
Me neither. I just know that's the thing.
characteristics of a Leo. Okay, so we know that astronomy is what God created, and astrology is the perversion. It's Satan and man's perversion of God's astronomy. And so Genesis 1:15, God said, "Let there be lights in the expanse of the sky to separate the day from the night, and let them serve as signs to mark seasons and days and years." So God created the stars and the constellations. Job 9, He is the maker of the bear and Orion, the Pleiades, which was that star cluster on the shoulder of Taurus, and the constellations of the south, which would be Scorpio. In Job 38, can you bind the beautiful Pleiades? Can you loose the cords of Orion? Can you bring the constellations in their seasons, or lead out the bear with its cubs? In Isaiah 40, lift your eyes and look to the heavens. Who created all these? He who brings out the starry hosts one by one and calls them each by name. Because of his great power and mighty strength, not one of them is missing. Psalm 19, 1 through 4, the stars communicate. You just look at the verbs. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they display knowledge. There's no speech or language where their voice is not heard. Their voice goes out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. In Romans 10:18, the question is asked, had the Jews of Christ's day heard that Messiah had come? But I asked, did they not hear? Of course they did. Their voice has gone out into all the earth, their words to the ends of the world. Whose voice? The stars. And in Acts chapter 2, Peter is this uneducated fisherman, but he's been with Jesus for 3 years, and he's referring to some celestial events that mark the death of Jesus and will again be seen when Christ returns to conquer the enemies of his church. And we're going to, in our presentation, we'll talk about the blood moon that was seen on the day of the crucifixion and the darkening of the sun for 3 hours while he was on the cross. So is it okay with God for us to look for signs in the stars? Jesus said in Luke 21, there will be signs in the sun, moon, and stars. He's speaking of conditions on the earth at the close of the tribulation, which is the 70th week of Daniel's prophecy. All right, little historical background. The Magi, the wise men, they were knowledgeable about many things, including the stars. They were often the court astronomers who were consulted by the rulers of the day for guidance. And King Nebuchadnezzar, of course, ruled 500 years earlier. He had numerous magi, and he made the Jewish prophet Daniel the chief magus of his court because Daniel alone was able to interpret his dreams. Now, Daniel never left Babylon, and he apparently continued to teach and train these Babylonian magi, and some of them were likely of Hebrew ancestry. So the Jewish philosopher Philo was a contemporary of Jesus, but he lived in Alexandria, Egypt, a large Jewish community there. And he wrote of a prestigious Eastern school of magi from Persia, which may have originated from Daniel's magi in Babylon. Their prestige and their Jewish roots would explain why Herod and the Jewish chief priests gave these magi an audience and strongly reacted to the news they brought. It also explains why the Magi came 700 miles to seek the birth of a Jewish king. So apparently these Magi, at least some of them, were Jewish. All right, we're going to move a little bit into some of the Roman history and talk a little bit more about astrology. Suetonius wrote that Tiberius Caesar, who reigned at the time of Jesus' birth, was addicted to astrology. Tacitus, in his Histories, Book 2, wrote that Emperor Vespasian kept a personal astrologer, Seleucus. And Tacitus, again in Book 5, said that most of the Jews believed that their ancient priestly writings contained prophecy about the East, growing strong at that time, and men from Judea should possess the world. Now, Suetonius said Vespasian was so concerned with this prophecy of the Christ that he tried to exterminate the entire Davidic family line. Josephus did not believe the prophecy, but he recorded his belief that it was the cause of the first Jewish war against the Romans. That's the war that ended up in the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple, of course. He was a Jewish priest, a scholar, a historian. Flavius Josephus lived from 37 AD to 100 AD. He was from an aristocratic Jewish family and was made the military governor of Galilee. And in 66 AD, he was commander of the Galilean forces of the Jewish army that opposed Rome for about 2 years. That's about as long as they lasted. He did not think they could beat the powerful Roman army. And in 67 AD, he was fighting against Vespasian's Roman troops when he and 40 other fighters were trapped in a cave and agreed to a suicide pact. Josephus and one other man changed their minds and survived being captured by the Romans. He was good at self-preservation, as you'll see. In captivity, he told Vespasian, this seemed a little self-serving, but he told Vespasian that Jewish prophecies had made reference to Vespasian becoming emperor of Rome. He also claimed to have a vision from God about this. Josephus was serving Titus, the son of Vespasian, in Judea at the time that Vespasian became emperor in 69 AD. Titus conquered and destroyed Jerusalem in 70 AD. He released Josephus because he was the negotiator between the Jews and the Romans during the siege of Jerusalem. Titus took Josephus with him to Rome in 71 AD. Had Josephus stayed in Palestine, he wouldn't have lasted very long.
Mm-hmm.
He was seen as a traitor at that time. After Titus crushed the Jewish revolt, he returned to Rome with enough booty and slaves to finance an epic construction program. And as emperor, a few years later, he finished the Colosseum in Rome in 80 AD. So when you see the Colosseum, you think that was paid for by Jewish wealth and Jewish slaves. Josephus was granted citizenship and a pension. He was a favorite at the court of the emperors Vespasian, Titus, Domitian, and he wrote extensive histories of the Jewish revolt, 66 to 70 AD, and earlier Jewish history. His four main works are major sources of information for us about the history of Jews and Christians in the first century. So the Jewish War was written in AD 75, and it covered the period of the Maccabees, which is about 167 BC, through the fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD. The Jewish Antiquities is 21 volumes, completed in 94 AD. He defends the Jewish people by outlining the great accomplishments of Old Testament heroes such as Abraham and Moses. Against Appian is a 2-volume work that compares the longevity of the Jewish religion with the relatively recent traditions of the Greeks. He was pretty diplomatic in this gentle slap towards anyone that was not Jewish. And the life of Josephus is an autobiography that may be an appendix to his Antiquities. Now, he adds important details to dates given in the New Testament. He links Caesar Augustus, who's the one that called for the census of the Jews in Luke chapter 2, with Herod the Great, who the Magi visited before seeing the baby. He confirms that John the Baptist was beheaded by Herod Antipas. He mentions these Roman emperors, Tiberius, Gaius, Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, and Titus. He wrote about Roman prefects Pontius Pilate and Antonius Felix and Porcius Festus. He wrote details about the Pharisees, Sadducees, the Essenes, the Sanhedrin, the Tetrarchy of Philip, the office of high priest. Gives us a lot of information about them. In his Antiquities, volume 18, 3.3, the Testimonium Flavianum says, Jesus was a wise teacher who won over many Jews and Greeks, was condemned to die on a cross, and the tribe of Christians, so called after him, has still to this day not disappeared. Now, there are other phrases in this passage that talk about Jesus being the Messiah and having accomplished surprising feats. It's thought that those were possibly added by a Christian copyist because they would be unlikely statements coming from a Jew, even a traitor like Josephus. So, compared to other sources in archaeological evidence, Josephus is very accurate for events in his own time and close to his lifetime. Whether we view him as a prophet, a traitor, priest, or historian, he does give us a lot of insight into first century history. Let's switch to the Pharisees. Jesus said they were plainly on the lookout for the Christ. In John 1:14, the Pharisees came to John the Baptist seeking answers about Messiah. And John quoted Isaiah 40, verse 3. He called himself a voice of one calling in the desert, prepare the way for the Lord, make straight in the wilderness a highway for our God. Now the Pharisees answered, "Why then do you baptize if you're not the Christ or Elijah or the prophet?" And they're referring to this Deuteronomy 18 passage where the Lord tells Moses, "I'll raise up for them a prophet," who we think is Jesus, "like you, Moses, from among their brothers. If anyone does not listen to my words that the prophet speaks in my name, I myself will call him to account." And that, of course, came true. On meeting Jesus, Andrew immediately went and told Peter and the others that he had found the Christ. Even the Samaritan woman at the well had this on her mind. She told Jesus, "I know the Messiah, called Christ, is coming." It was accepted in that day that the stars could announce the arrival of a prophet or Messiah. About 60 years earlier, in 63 BC, some magi had come to the Roman Senate claiming the stars indicated a new ruler had been born. Now the Senate responded by ordering the death of baby boys in that age range. But some senators' wives were pregnant, so they conspired to keep the decree from taking effect. Each may have also hoped that their unborn child might be that ruler. This may have become a Roman precedent, followed by Herod when he ordered the killing of baby boys in Bethlehem. And it may be one reason that Jerusalem was troubled by the news the Magi brought, because there was already this precedent among the Romans. Get rid of your enemies, or your future enemies. Now Tiberius was Roman Caesar until 37 AD, but in his mid-60s he entered semi-retirement on the island of Capri. If you've seen pictures of Capri, you know why. It's a beautiful place. And that was about 26 AD. So he was emperor for 11 years after he moved to Capri. Well, he left a regent in the capital named Aelius Sejanus, who had been captain of the Praetorian Guard. He was very loyal to Tiberius. He was also cunning and ruthless. Over 5 years as regent, he had carefully eliminated many of his opponents and Tiberius' potential successors. He almost plotted and murdered his way to the throne. Unfortunately for Sejanus, Tiberius had a trusted sister-in-law, Antonia, who managed to get a secret letter to him. Sejanus had pretty much controlled the communication to him, but she managed somehow to get this letter to him detailing Sejanus' web of plots in convincing detail. So Tiberius hatched his own surprise plot. He sent an emissary with a lengthy letter to be read before the Senate with Sejanus present. At the end of the letter, he exposed Sejanus and he demanded that he be arrested. He was dragged out and executed the same day. That day was 10/18 of 31. Now Sejanus had influenced and then himself made appointments of many imperial officials, including Pontius Pilate. Pilate was made prefect of Judea about 26 AD. Sejanus was a notorious anti-Semite, and Pilate followed his anti-Jewish policies in Judea. The Jews, of course, shunned all graven images. Pilate had people sneak in by night and install images of Tiberius in the Jewish temple in Jerusalem. That was a massive offense to the Jews. And so a large crowd of Jews rushed to Caesarea to appeal with Pilate to remove the images. He refused, so they fell on the ground for 5 days and kind of came to a showdown. Pilate had his soldiers surround the Jews with swords drawn, and the Jews exposed their bare necks and said they would rather be slain than have their law transgressed. I can't tell you exactly how that ended, but I think Pilate relented. Another time, Philo reported that Pilate proposed to set up a large idol in the Holy of Holies in the temple. Josephus reported that Pilate was regularly seizing the religious offerings made by worshiping Jews to pay for Roman work projects. Luke 13:1 tells of Galileans whose blood Pilate mixed with their sacrifices to desecrate the temple. John 19, reminds of how offended the Jews were that Pilate put a sign over Jesus on the cross saying, "Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews," and refused to change it. He wouldn't even change it to, he said he was King of the Jews. So what changed? What changed to motivate Pilate to execute Jesus as the Jews demanded instead of releasing him to spite them? What changed was that Sejanus was dead. Tiberius began to root out Sejanus's appointees and allies. Many were tried, tortured, executed cruelly. So everyone who Sejanus had appointed or who was his ally was really afraid for their life. Tiberius also changed a lot of Sejanus's orders and policies, including the anti-Semitic ones. So after 10/18 of 31, Pilate lived in a lethal political context. His strange ambivalence toward Jesus and the Jewish leadership wasn't so strange at all when you know all those circumstances. We can understand why Pilate would genuinely dread the chant of those Jews who demanded Christ's execution. John 19:12. From then on, Pilate tried to set Jesus free, but the Jews kept shouting, "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar." He was already living on borrowed time, so that would really worry him. I'm going to throw in just a little more history, which will become evident in a little bit. But the history of the printing press. So we had block printing as early as 868 AD, where they took a block of wood and carved the image, and then they used that to print. And by 100 years later, they had movable type. And fast forward to 1450 AD, the Gutenberg press had movable type, and it was capable of printing about 240 pages per hour. So that's what, 4 pages a minute? That's pretty quick. Over the next 50 years, the use of that press spread across Europe, and bringing it forward, 1800, the 1800s, industrial printing presses were invented, and in modern times we have offset and digital printing that can print up to 18,000 sheets per hour. So why is that important? In 1544, there was a typesetting error on a reprint of Flavius Josephus' Jewish history, and it changed the date. This error changed the date of King Herod the Great's death from 1 BC to 4 BC. And this caused Johannes Kepler, who we'll talk about, who was an astronomer and a mathematician, it caused him to look for the Star of Bethlehem in the wrong year. He was looking in 5 BC instead of 2 or 3 BC. And even though he had this theory of planetary motion we're going to speak about, his math was amazing, done without computers. He still failed to find the Star of Bethlehem in 5 BC. Okay.
Can you go back to that real quick, just sorry?
Yes. Yes, I can.
Maybe. Right.
Yes, maybe.
Okay, thank you.
I don't want to be too redundant, but just we know that Johannes Kepler was a brilliant mathematician, and he worked with another guy named Bray, who was an astronomer who had made a lot of observations and recorded the math, and he was trying to fit his observations into his theory that the planets had circular orbits around the sun, and then when Bray died because of his playboy lifestyle, Kepler got all of his data, which Bray had been he had held back and only given Kepler little by little. So then he got it all, and he very quickly was able to come up with his theories his laws of planetary motion, which NASA still uses today. We know that the planets move in elliptical orbits and different sizes ellipses. The Mars orbit is very flat and long, and anyway, we know a lot about how the planets move, and Kepler was able to say, all right, what did the sky look like at this date and time? And he would have found the Star of Bethlehem if he had had the correct date of Herod's death. Okay. Any questions? We're gonna start our DVD. See how we're doing. Perfect. Okay. That's not where I was gonna stop with my whole Leo episode. I just lost a couple of minutes there. So we're gonna take this up next week and finish it.
It's a giant tease.
Yeah.
He's pretty good. He's pretty entertaining, and it gets better. I did have a little repetition built in where I covered some of those scriptures, but it's just gonna get better.
It does.
So,
What was that
you have-
Romans passage? Did somebody have that?
Yeah, I can get it.
Romans 10:18.
10:18.
Excellent, thank you.
So thank you guys for participating, and we'll pick this up next week. We'll have time for questions.
Thank you.
I started it this week so we can still have some time for questions. Thank you.